Hey everyone, the week is already heating up around here because the Patriots don't have any time to waste and they're already looking ahead to this Saturday's challenge. The New England Patriots will take the field to face the Eagles, and this matchup promises to give us plenty to analyze. So, Patriots fans, stay tuned because today we're going to talk about everything surrounding the Patriots ahead of this big showdown, what we can expect from the game, and the biggest points of attention for the team. So hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's get straight into the latest Patriots news. The Patriots are heading into one of the most important practices of the preseason, and this is not going to feel like an ordinary day on the practice field. New England is set to take on the Philadelphia Eagles in a joint practice, and there are several storylines that could make this one of the most revealing moments of the preseason so far. The biggest storyline is impossible to ignore: A.J. Brown going against the team he used to play for. Since Brown arrived in New England, this matchup has been sitting in the background, waiting for the moment when he would finally line up across from his former teammates. Now that moment is here, and even if the players insist that there is no bad blood, it is difficult to believe that nobody will be paying extra attention to what happens between Brown and the Eagles. Nolan Smith has already pushed back against the idea that there is some kind of personal conflict. His message was that there is no bad blood and that this is simply a case of iron sharpening iron. That may be the official answer, but once the pads come on and Brown starts running routes against Philadelphia's defenders, the intensity could tell a different story. And honestly, there is a reason why everyone will be watching Brown. The expectations surrounding him are enormous. The source material points out that Brown has produced 1,000-yard seasons in 6 of the last 7 years, along with a repeated history of scoring 7 touchdowns in a season. Now he has a new uniform, a new offense, and a new opportunity to prove himself against the organization he left behind. There have already been questions surrounding Brown. People have questioned his knees. People have questioned whether he is still able to create separation at the same level. That makes this practice even more interesting because Brown has an opportunity to answer those questions on the field. And on the other side, Philadelphia has something to prove too. The Eagles have to show that they can remain a superstar, Super Bowl contending team without one of their biggest offensive weapons. That is why this does not feel like just another practice. The matchup between Brown and Philadelphia's secondary could become one of the defining moments of the entire session, especially if Quinyon Mitchell is out there. There had been an injury concern surrounding Mitchell, but the expectation mentioned in the source is that he could participate. That would give Brown an opportunity to face one of Philadelphia's most important defensive backs. But Brown is not the only player who needs to be watched. Drake Maye is entering another major test against a defense that has a reputation for being extremely talented. Maye looked impressive against the Indianapolis Colts, completing passes consistently and making plays throughout the practice. We also saw the connection between Maye and Brown, including a pass involving Brown against Sauce Gardner. Now the question is whether Maye can carry that level of performance into a much tougher challenge against Philadelphia. The Eagles have a talented secondary, and the source specifically highlights Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and Eric Weddle as players who make this defense difficult to attack. That creates a completely different kind of challenge for Maye. It is one thing to make plays against one opponent during preseason preparation. It is another thing to consistently make those throws against a defense filled with players capable of disrupting the passing game. For Patriots fans, this is one of the most important things to watch. Can Drake Maye continue to look confident when the competition gets tougher? Because while the Patriots offense has shown positive signs, the defense also has some serious questions to answer. The secondary struggled badly against the Colts. There was a stretch where Daniel Jones completed 7 straight passes, and it exposed some problems in coverage. At the same time, there is important context. Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez were not playing in that situation, which meant New England was relying on players such as Kindle Vildor, Marcellus Dial, and Kyron Prunty. But Christian Gonzalez is still a major question mark for this practice. According to the information in the source, Gonzalez was absent from the Patriots walkthrough, and Mike Vrabel said the team was still working on his return to play. That makes it unlikely that Patriots fans will see Gonzalez participate in the joint practice. Carlton Davis, however, is expected to be back on the field, and that puts even more pressure on him. Davis is coming back from injury, and his first practice back was not exactly the return the Patriots wanted to see. The source describes a difficult practice in which he gave up several touchdowns in team drills. A.J. Brown reportedly made a big play against him, while Kahan Butte also made a contested catch over the top. That cannot happen consistently against Philadelphia. Philadelphia, Carlton Davis knows what kind of player he can be. There are moments when he looks extremely good, and there are moments when things go in the opposite direction. This joint practice gives him the perfect opportunity to respond. If Gonzalez cannot play, Davis becomes even more important. Behind him, the Patriots could have players such as Charles Woods, Kindle Vildor, or Kyron Prunty taking significant first-team reps. Marcus Jones is also expected to be fine in coverage, but Prunty is particularly interesting because he has been earning more first-team opportunities and has already made plays in practice, including breaking up passes. Now he could be facing a much bigger challenge. Philadelphia still has receiving talent even without Brown. Devonta Smith remains a major weapon, while Deontay Bynum and Hollywood Brown are also mentioned as players who can contribute. The Eagles were also expected to be without Mail Lemon, who was still dealing with an injury. That means New England's secondary cannot simply focus on one receiver. They have to prove that they can handle the entire group. And there is another area that could decide whether this practice becomes a positive step for the Patriots. The 1-minute drill. This is where the mistakes from the Colts practice become especially important. The Patriots have been working on situations where the offense gets roughly 1 minute, starting around the 35-yard line, with the objective of driving down the field and scoring a touchdown. The defense has the opposite job: stop the offense from scoring. Against Indianapolis, New England struggled on both sides. On offense, Drake May attempted to find Pop Douglas in the middle of the end zone, but the throw was underthrown and intercepted by Cam Bingham. It was not the kind of decision or execution the Patriots wanted to see in a situation designed to simulate late game pressure. Then the defense had its own problem. Daniel Jones led the Colts down the field and connected with Josh Downs for a touchdown with 1 second remaining. Downs beat Marcus Jones on a quick out and then talked plenty of trash afterward. Daniel Jones also managed to beat an all-out blitz. Those are exactly the situations New England needs to clean up. Practice does not count in the standings, but these scenarios matter because eventually the Patriots will face them when the games actually count. The purpose of these drills is to prepare players for those moments before the regular season arrives. And then there is the offensive line. This could be one of the biggest tests of the entire practice. The Patriots are expected to work with Will Campbell, Elijah Vera Tucker, Jared Wilson, Michael Onwenu, Morgan Moses, and Caleb Blamo, among others. There could also be rotation, with Marcus Bryant potentially stepping in if Campbell gets some time off. Caleb Blamo could potentially move between tackle positions, while Jared Wilson faces the enormous challenge of dealing with Philadelphia's defensive front. And that defensive front is exactly why this test matters so much. Will Campbell has reportedly been excellent throughout camp, with very few reps where he has been beaten, but this is a completely different challenge. Philadelphia brings a defensive front that is considered among the best in the league, with players such as Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter creating serious problems up front. For a Patriots offensive line that is being rebuilt after struggles in previous seasons, this is a chance to prove that things really are changing. It is not enough to look good against average competition. At some point, you have to line up against one of the strongest defensive fronts in football and hold your ground. That is what makes this joint practice so important for New England. It is not a regular season game, and nothing that happens on this practice field will decide the Patriots' record, but it can reveal weaknesses, it can reveal progress, it can show whether the offensive line is ready for a higher level of competition, it can show whether Drake May can continue making plays against a talented defense, it can show whether Carlton Davis is ready to return to form, and of course, it can give everyone a very close look at A.J. Brown against his former team. The intensity could be very real. The players may talk about respect, they may say this is simply about getting better, but with two talented teams practicing against each other, with players trying to earn roster spots and starting roles, and with Brown facing Philadelphia for the first time in this environment, there is a lot riding on every rep, and the fans are going to make it even louder. Philadelphia fans are expected to travel to the area, and with the relatively short trip between Philadelphia and Foxborough, the atmosphere around the practice could become intense. The rivalry, the history, the A.J. Brown storyline, and the competitive nature of joint practices all create the possibility of a very physical and emotional day. For Patriots fans, though, the most important thing is not whether there is a fight or who wins a single rep. It is what New England learns. Can Drake May continue to make the right throws against a talented Eagles defense? Can Carlton Davis bounce back and show that his difficult return was only one bad day? Can Kyron Prunty continue earning trust with the first team? Can the Patriots secondary survive without Christian Gonzalez? And can this revamped offensive line stand up against one of the strongest defensive fronts it will see all preseason? Those are the questions that could tell us much more about the Patriots than the final score of a preseason game ever could. So Patriots fans, with all of these storylines coming together, what is the one thing you are watching most closely in this joint practice? AJ Brown facing his former team, Drake May against Philadelphia's defense, the Patriots secondary without Christian Gonzalez, or the offensive line facing the Eagles' defensive front. And once you look beyond the biggest names, there is another reason this joint practice could be extremely important for the Patriots. This is where the depth of the roster is going to be tested, because when a team loses an important starter, the question is not simply whether the starter can play. The real question is whether the players behind him are ready to take advantage of the opportunity. That is exactly what New England is facing in the secondary. Christian Gonzalez is still working toward his return, which means the Patriots cannot simply wait for their top cornerback to come back and solve every problem. The players who are available right now have to show that they can survive against legitimate NFL competition, and Philadelphia is going to provide exactly that challenge. Carlton Davis is the obvious player to watch, but Kyron Prunty could be one of the more